This is Vlad, and this is the first of the research interviews we're doing for Radical Transparency, the movie, and we're doing it with the awesome Benji Rogers, who is founder of Pledgemusic.com and founder of blockchainmedia.com.
Blockchain Media.
Oh, there we are. We got it right. Say it one more time so we get it.
The Blockchain Media Project.
Okay, there we are.
Yeah, and so it stops being a startup, it'll become the Blockchain Media Company, and then it'll be, it's this project, then company, then, then who knows what. Decentralized autonomous organization.
That's a good way of being. So look, before we maybe dive into like more general subjects, tell me a little bit about what you're doing and why you're doing it above all.
Yeah, so basically it occurred to me at my last company, Pledgemusic, that the majority of the media files that we received from artists and labels were in the form of archaic file formats like WAV files. If you've ever seen a your song name.wav, that's a WAV file. And those were introduced during the presidency of George Bush I, about 26 years ago. They're rowdy cousin, the MP3, a couple of years later. And as I looked at these formats, I realized that they have not been modernized really since then. And one of the key sort of most important things about media is that if you do not know who owns the media, who wrote it, who created it, you have a hard time paying them or committing commerce with them or getting a permission or, and as anyone who's ever tried to put a film together will know, the sync licensing part tends to be one of the hardest bits to get right. Literally because there is no place written down as to who owns the song that you want to license. You would think it would be a label, but it's actually not. It's some other people. So I basically looked at this landscape and said, well, if we're going to go into a world of blockchains and we're going to go into a world of artificial intelligence, if we're going to go into a world where VR is going to be a dominant media format, all of this ability to contact and license the people involved in songs is going to need to get streamlined. And as a songwriter myself, an artist myself, and performer myself for many years with massive highs and crushing lows, what occurred to me was that I, as a songwriter, have no place to digitally inscribe my rights into my songs because the WAV file or the MP3 was not designed to carry any information. It was designed literally just to copy whatever was on it and pass it on. And I'm for that in general. But at the same time, if I don't want my music to be used in a white supremacist video, shouldn't I be able to write down, please not use in white supremacist video? And therefore, I wouldn't have to police it after the fact. It could just not happen. And I call that digital rights expression. And what I mean by that is that every artist or creator of any kind should be able to digitally inscribe their ownership as a right into their media. And it should be persistent, so that if ownership changes, something needs to track it all. And our conception of it is that a blockchain should be used to track that. Basically, we're going into a world in which all of the interfaces, we can augment reality before us. We can go into virtual worlds, and yet we have to go back in time to get the fucking song out of this old format into a new one. And if you do want to do the right thing and pay those who created that song, then I think you should be able to find them at least. And they should have the ability to say, hey, here I am, feel free to pay me. Or, hey, I see you've used it in a really cool way. Can I help promote that on my own? Because I think it's awesome. And so our media has to get smart, not just the humans around it. For any one media participant to get paid, it requires 17 to 20 people to get their shit right. And how often do 17 to 20 people coordinate in like fashion to get shit right? It's quite uncommon in this space, particularly when there's dollars around.
Two things. You've got the screen with me to your left, haven't you?
Yes.
Because you know what I'm saying. You look a little bit like Asperger's, like you can't look people in the face. So if you can, that would be awesome.
Cool. How's that?
That's fucking awesome. Could you tell me if I'm like, maybe not me, but say my nephew, the musician, starting out, got a bit of a following as a DJ or something. How does that work for him?
Sure. So basically, any artist will have a free interface given to them. This is an open source project, a public benefit corporation, in which they can literally take a song, put it into this free piece of software, kind of like Slack, kind of like a WhatsApp group, and they'll be able to message the participants to the song to say, "Hey, I wrote 20%. Do you agree?" "Yes, I do." You know, you can do that type of kind of cool thing in there. And the song or the media becomes the surface upon which we collaborate. Whereas today, we have to send each other emails, texts, faxes, you know, carrier pigeons, whatever the hell it's going to be. That's how we communicate around media. Whereas in tomorrow, when we get this right, the song is the surface, or the piece of media is the surface upon which you communicate. We're starting with music because it's, you know, the business I know and what I've come from, but this is actually for all media. So any video, any blog, any piece of news, journalism written, are all collaborative, multi-party pieces of media. So if you go into a studio with a musician, how are you supposed to collaborate on not just the music itself, but also the ownership side, if there is literally no place to do so? It's kind of insane. Hey, so for example, Vlad, you're going to make this movie, right? And it's going to be, you know, this can be shared all over the place. But the media that you're recording, right, is going to be this dumb file, right? And that dumb file is going to have to then have some data added to it. And you're going to string along the telegraph cables and hope that they all communicate. Problem is, someone takes the line down halfway through. And so what we believe is that every piece of media, if the participants to it can collaborate in a way that favors all, then what you have is a scenario whereby any company, entity, filmmaker, blogger can commit commerce with the file versus having to find who owns it. Send a message to the file will basically propagate to the right people come back, and so you have an instantaneous, at the speed of digital, commercial possibility between the participants, which I think is awesome.
So is this music for big business as it is right now, and indie labels, or do you think it might change who can make a living out of music and who can make a living out of their creativity? Because a lot of people are really scared right now about losing their jobs and what jobs are going to be there in the future. And a lot of people are saying, hey, in this bright new future, you can follow your passion, you can do this, you can do that. Is this part of the story?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, you know, along the philosophy, I think it was Mark Andreessen who said, you know, there'll be people who are told what to do by machines and people who tell machines what to do. And so ultimately, if you're a media creator, your media needs to be able to tell the machine what to do. Whereas right now you have to go to centralized authorities. They manage a whole bunch of machines and you get the end result. So the protocol for media, the literal way in which media moves around, needs to become a system of intelligence.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is this: if we can collaborate on who owns what within a piece of media, what that means is that the device owned by Amazon, the device owned by Google, etc., can talk directly to the media itself. It doesn't require the interpretation of a performing rights organization or label. Now, you can still use those people and those companies. It's not wrong to do so. But what we're really talking about is you can sort of, as long as you know who owns it, and that ownership can never be taken away, it can be given an identity and authority within a sort of a machine readable future. You know, I really believe this. My daughter is 6 years old.
Yeah.
She tells a machine what to do with her voice. She says, play this, and it shows up. She doesn't know where it comes from. If you said to her, where does media come from? She points to the machine and says, from there. So the job of a marketer of the future, if you make media, your job is going to be to get someone to tell a machine to surface it for them, right? That's a very different job.
So is this a world where more people are going to be like YouTube creators, kind of making music and making money for advertising and kind of running their lives from a dashboard on an app? Is that kind of what you're telling me?
No, I think we're moving into a world in which the artists and creators of the future will measure return on attention. What they will do is they will say, I have a certain base of followers across 12 social media platforms. Where should I point them today? And they will point them, the smart ones will point them towards the place that gives them either data or money. because and data equals money is the answer. So what happens is these artists are going to become the interface. So don't think of it as terms of, quick, make sure I'm on Spotify, quick, make sure I'm on YouTube, because those will be inferior places to get return on attention. Whereas if you create the interface yourself, the VR game that you own and expose to the world, you will use those companies to gather your kind of spotlight to shine towards what you want it to. I saw this directly when huge media stars would pound all of their information, all of their attention towards Facebook. And in the end, it returned them a 0.1% organic reach unless they paid Facebook. So if I have to pay Facebook to reach my own fans and it returns no data to me, that's very low return on attention. Whereas if my media can make a deal with all of the Amazon and Google devices for a per stream rate that I've chosen, or for a per watch or listen rate that I've chosen, then all of a sudden I will favor the one which returns me the most amount of information, data, and the most amount of revenue. Because otherwise I'm being an idiot. So I watched this happen directly, just to give you some context here. When I was in the MySpace generation, and so I built up a following of 150,000 odd MySpace followers. And what was amazing was I could message them and say, hey, here's a show. Hey, here's a CD you can buy, on and on. And I actually made a good living and a really good, healthy network of exchange. Then MySpace suddenly said, you can't message any of your fans anymore. And I was like, oh, shit. So to push your users towards that is an inferior decision to make if you are a content creator. What you will want to turn to is hey, stream my music for free. Just give me an email address or an SMS in exchange. That way, when I'm playing a show near you, I can geolocate to you and offer you a ticket at a discount because I know you're there, right? Or you went to the last show, here's something on the way out. So this idea that the media needs to be smart so that you can create systems of intelligence that artists can use will mean that we can go beyond YouTube creators and beyond Facebook, posting, to literally allowing systems of intelligence around the creators to emerge. And the cool part about that is that once you know who the humans you're supposed to interact with, you can ask them what they want, and they will pay what they want.
So this is like, so basically what you're telling me, data is the most important thing. Data is what you need to own. Data is what you need to gather. Data is what you need to interpret. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah,
if you think of the largest companies in the world right now, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, they do basically the same thing. They harvest the attention of users and turn it into actionable data. Why can't influencers do that? So what's amazing is it's influencers that build these platforms, influencers that make these platforms billions of dollars by taking a shovel of all of their private and personal and exciting and interesting and amazing data on themselves and their fans and saying, here Apple, here Facebook, here Google, have it, please. No, honestly, I don't need all this valuable information on who my customers are. You should be the custodian of it. That's what's been happening for the last 10 years. I've been writing about it for 10 years because what happens is if you create an alternate type of platform, right? So Pledgemusic, my first company, was by design from day one, this type of platform, which said this: if you send your customers to us, we return them to you after having paid you an average spend per fan of $55, and you get their email address, and phone number. So if we suck as a platform, or we die, or we decide to be evil, you own all your information. We can't take it from you. So what happens is the platforms that align with the financial and data goals of the creators are the ones that will survive and thrive in the future. Because what will happen?
Does this mean the new Facebook is going to be one where you get to keep your own data, where like maybe it's not owned by a big company, maybe it's more like a co-op or something like that? Is that the future?
I think it's possible, but I think what will happen is it'll be siloed at first. It'll be a bunch of artists creating their own things. We see this with apps like EscapeX or Superphone. EscapeX is effectively monetizing the attention of its users for the creator. So, an actor like Jeremy Renner will post basically Instagram-style updates, and his fans upvote comments with money. It seems crazy, but they want to, right? Because that's how they engage in a video game type space. There is this trade in money, but the music and media industry sort of says, no, no, no. We've looked at it and we know exactly what consumers want. They want to spend $9 to $11.99 per month to listen to stuff from our server. Do
So
they really?
So look forward to like 5-10 years. What's the future around like music and musicians earning money and creators making money in this kind of world?
Yeah. So there'll be two classes to this. There'll be those that are basically making a sort of an okay living using the incumbent platforms, but that will be restricted by their rules. So
Okay.
Facebook won't let you do X. Social network Y won't let you do Y, and on and on. Then there will be this other class that will create platforms and syndicate them out for others to use. So effectively, what will happen is it'll be these key platforms will emerge so the average consumer will be sent a button that just says listen to it, and that button will travel with them wherever they want to go, and it won't matter where. And effectively, the rules will be set at the content level. So if this person has spent $1,000 on you that year going to shows and buying merch, you may want to give it to them for free in exchange for an ongoing, just like sharing it. You may decide, hey, if you share this with 3 of your friends, you get it for nothing. And you get $5 in coin A for artist B. So what we're going to look at is the value will be in the network of sharing and in the way in which attention is measured. So that return on attention metric means that the artist is literally the interface. So I will go and hit play on Beyonce of the future. I will go and hit play on, band, whoever the hell it is, Ed Sheeran of the future. The reason that will happen is it won't matter where the media comes from. It just needs to be easy, convenient. And then when an artist gets to a certain size and the managers of old die off and the new ones come in, where these people will say, well, hang on a minute. Why are we giving away all of our digital gold and future to companies whose whims are entirely dependent on stock market price and boardroom decisions? So you can automate a huge amount of your industry, once you get systems of intelligence based on, augmented intelligence, as an example, whereby one social media influencer from their phone can basically run a business of 70 to 100,000 humans from a phone. Like there was a guy that does this today. His name's Ryan Leslie. So what will happen
what does Ryan Leslie do? How does he do this?
Basically, he's a rapper and entrepreneur. And effectively what he does is he's built an app called Superphone, and from it he runs a $2 million per album cycle business from his phone using SMS.
Wow.
And using Messenger. But again, all he thinks is, if I send him to Spotify, how do I invite him to my show? If I send him to Pandora, how do I get him to know I have a new hat? And the most important thing for him is like, if I know who these humans are, we can commit commerce with each other. So he sources people that want to be in his videos from his network versus let's hire some extras. You know what I mean? So what we go to is, if the artist can have a system of intelligence and can make their media smart, then that media can commit commerce with the platforms, which means that Apple or Google may say, hey, we really want that new record. In which case the media already has the rules defined within it that was set by the creator. You don't want to limit what's possible. You want to digitally express rights into media. That means that wherever this media shows up, on whatever surface, you can communicate and interact with that surface. I believe that we'll walk into a subway soon, right? And the subway sign will recognize me and say, hey, Ryan Leslie wanted you to listen to this today. And I'll just go, done. And it'll start to play in my headphones, and it'll be a message from Ryan saying, hey, thanks for coming to my show last night. Really appreciate it. Wanted you to hear this before everybody else. And the reason that's possible is because the media would need to be able to communicate with all of the various surfaces on which it will emerge. And we cannot be stuck in this idea that we will go, oh, wait, let me type in the name of this artist into my streaming service so I can listen to it on my speakers. We're not there anymore. And the faster we get to that, the influence of the future will be the ones that can control via a system of intelligence their media and their online presence and offer it to those that return the greatest return on attention.
Okay. So Benji, look, you're sitting there in Brooklyn right now, but I know you're always traveling around the world. Like I can never get hold of you because you're somewhere having a chat. And it's because you've been in blockchain, and I think even a couple of years ago, you got called the third most influential person in the world in blockchain.
Yeah, God knows how that
You
happened.
know your shit. You know your shit. Maybe help me understand a little bit more, broaden out. I mean, maybe just to start off with, what's your kind of vision between blockchain and AI and crypto tech and all the stuff that's happening in the world right now?
So if you think about the modern economy is based on a very thin concept, which is this: TCP/IP, or the internet, is a tiny strip, and then all the applications built on top represent the huge part. So I'll send you a diagram for this, but basically what you got thin rail TCP/IP, which was free, given away, packets moving across the internet, right? And then you've got Google, Facebook, Apple, and these companies built on top. Now, if you took at the crypto world, Bitcoin represents the huge protocol, Ethereum, then the others, and the tiniest sliver on top of the applications. So I read the other day that if you'd invested the first seed in the seed round of one of the biggest Bitcoin companies, Coinbase, if you'd invested in the seed round of Coinbase versus just buying the same amount in Bitcoin, you would have made more money in Bitcoin. So the protocol upon which media travels is going to be more powerful. And blockchains are what enable that, because effectively what you can do is in blockchains, you can set up rules between, participants on the node. But what gets interesting is no one's ever made the blockchain for media. There's been a lot of people who said they're going to do it, but what we're designing is this: we can't make the media smart in the absence of blockchain. So what happens is we had to build a blockchain for media, and that we're going to use another blockchain, because again, blockchain will be a service, same as cloud as a service, same as email as a service. Blockchain will be a service, but the rules and the sets of, the difference being this: the TCP/IP of yesterday, as it would translate to blockchain, becomes the market. So we will see companies emerging 10 to 50 times the size of Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc.
10 to 50
built on the protocol easily. Because what you got to remember is the magnitude of the protocol layer to the application layer is this. So if you can make the protocol layer this, imagine what the applications will look like on top.
So explain that to me as if you were if I was like your mother or your cousin. It's like I've seen you posting stuff, like you're building stuff on other people's walls or in other people's gardens.
So effectively what happens is when you're building, so TCP/IP, what runs the internet, was given away for free. Okay. And it created trillions of dollars of value for the applications on top.
Okay.
Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Right? Now what we're saying is the protocol is the money.
Okay.
Which means that as you build these ways of working between each other, right, which are rule sets effectively that are governed by tokens, then what happens is the applications become very small on top. So you used to have fat applications and thin protocols. Now you have fat protocols and thin applications. So effectively what that means is if you create a blockchain for media, or what we're proposing is this format for media, it means that the history of all media created can be basically tokenized. So what that would mean is you get rewarded for correct and valid information, and you get punished for invalid information. So the potential for that.
Then you get punished for being bad, built into the system?
Correct. Effectively, no, we're not for being bad, for basically putting in misinformation into the chain. And this is a lot more complex than we're going, but effectively.
Politics?
What's that? Yes. Well, this is what happens. So basically what we've proposed in blockchain is this. We've got an identity model, which is based upon having authority over an asset. So you and I right now are creating a piece of media. Now, if you go off and edit this and remove my meaning, I won't know unless I have an identical copy and I can compare them with machines. Maybe you change 5 words. Excuse me, maybe you change 7 words, 10 words, whatever it is, right?
Should I just put this up completely unedited? Be radically transparent. Okay.
But so I won't know, right? Yeah. And so what happens is as we get towards these systems of intelligence for doing bad things, like, you know, rigging elections and that kind of thing, how do you compare the two? So I'm actually writing a blog about this in which I propose something. So imagine this: a politician gives a speech, and they mention 100,000 dead, and someone goes in with an application like Lyrebird.ai, a free AI, and alters that 100,000 dead to 10,000, alters 50% to 52%, alters 30 words in an hour's speech, and then so now you've got 12 different recordings of it, one of which is different, just ever so slightly different. But that one gets syndicated to 200 stations, and these other ones get syndicated to 700 stations. So now you've got two alternative pieces of news reaching different parties, right? Think of the chaos that could sow. Now, if you go to Lyrebird.ai's website, you'll see a picture of Barack Obama talking about how awesome Lyrebird AI is. He never said it. They have a big thing saying this does not represent Barack Obama. This is a digital representation of his voice, right? So the provenance of how media is created will become its power. So if you were to edit this in the blockchain world that I'm proposing, it would propose an amendment to this that would be viewable in a blockchain. And if you were to edit it and I were to reject it, you would be punished by not getting a token, right? But if you were to leave it as is and I were to corroborate it, we'd both get rewarded with a token. So what happens is you're incentivizing the corroboration of data between trusted parties. So then I would then have it, and I would have multiple other points of corroboration that I would have done, and so will you. So what we need to do is we need to create a world in which you can't just alter media to suit purpose. Because an AI like Lyrebird can literally digitally create a voice in 60 seconds that sounds like a crappy Skype call. But you know what? Yeah. Video on the internet was a crappy Skype call. Remember when it was little postage stamp things? Yeah. So in order for us to, if you want radical transparency, transparency shows how many edits it took to get that soundbite down from the original hour and who made those edits. So if you wanted to forensically audit it, you could go back down the blockchain and say, these 17 versions all represent the original. These 5 were altered to over 61% of the initial, therefore altering what is being said substantially enough to make it feasibly untrue. And it won't tell you it's true or false. It'll say, statistically speaking, this one is 71% true and this one's 35. So the reason that's so important is that if you want radical transparency, if you want to look at what people are saying, you have to know how it got there. Yeah. And so what happens is the ability to alter speech and video is coming upon us to where they give away Lyrebird for free. Like literally in 60 seconds, you can create your internet. I did it the other day. And literally, I played it for my daughter and my sister, like, this kind of sounds like you. And I'm like, I know, it's eerie, right? I have a half English, half American accent. Yeah. But all it does is it trains it. Any politician or any artist has said thousands and millions of words. You basically build that. So we're going into a world in which we won't know what's truth or false. But we will have a likelihood of being able to look at the citations and sources. And those cannot be centralized. You can only do that with a decentralized way of working. And so what we have to do, we have to get out of the mechanistic reductionist version of this and say, it's code is law. That's not good enough. What you have to say is that we are a human system grafting centralized authority into a decentralized world. We can prove who we are in relation to the assets we create. And we can do that via each other. In the same way that Facebook built its graph of humanity, we can build that graph of humanity into a blockchain-based world, but it will be based on what we create our output.
All right, so
yeah, sorry.
No, it's good. It's really good. So look, I want to go back to decentralized and I want to go back to like the good things that are going to happen. But you started scaring me. So it's just been Halloween. Do you want to scare me a little more? Like, what do you see the scary shit that might be coming up? What should we be worried about?
The scariest thing for me would be watching a country that effectively could alter everything that its politicians say. So you would never know what they're saying is true. Now, arguably, you never agree anyway. Yeah. But effectively, if you were to alter, forensically speaking, the files upon which the media is recorded, no one would know. Right now, there could be someone at Bloomberg, CNN, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post going in and just deleting shit. And how will we ever know? Because remember, there's no provenance trail of how it got there. And we love journalists, and I'm pro-journalism, and I believe they should do it, but they don't have the right tools. They're writing shit down on paper, taking photographs and recording stuff. But all of that is alterable, immeasurably so. So what's going to happen is if we don't have a machine-readable way, so basically what happens is we create stuff, and then we tell the machine how to disseminate it. I think we have to go the opposite way. We have to have machines help us to create it with provenance and security, and then we tell those machines how it should be disseminated. And so there should be no way to algorithmically alter what we're saying unless we give consent, because every change to our media will be a proposal. Because you picture this, in North Korea right now, let's just say Kim Jong-Un decides, hey, guess what? This is a speech that Donald Trump gave last night declaring his intention to do X, Y, and Z. And let's say that it was a true speech altered by 50 words, 50 key words. How would his population ever know that that wasn't exactly what Trump said in a world in which you can alter the audio and video? That's the power that this will have. And it's free on the damned internet. So all it takes is for the right state actor to decide, hey, my population seems just on the edge of getting really upset. Why don't we just spread them a whole bunch of bullshit? But instead of it being bullshit pushed in by out of power other state actors, this is actually the humans saying the things they're not saying. And so what happens is you get in a room with someone, you say, hey, did you actually say that? You say, well, no, that wasn't my intention, but I'm looking at myself saying it, and that's eerie, because I didn't say that. So the versioning of how media is created is the future of transparency.
Are you worried about your own personal data and your money and that kind of hacking? Or are you like, we're going to find ways of just making that not happen? Or is it even possible in a decentralized world?
Well, there's a few things there. Basically, the Bitcoin blockchain is really leading the way for how decentralization should work, and it's the first one. What's failing in certain areas is the wallet structures around it, because those are centralized. I have to give my information in. But those who are creating wallets, like I've got a hardware wallet here, etc. When you create your own hardware and you have an ability to protect yourself as much as you can. I'm also building this. So I'm building, the purpose of blockchain was to sit there and say, the reason I'm publishing so much of it is because if we fail as a company, I don't want the concepts to die, right? But the concept is this: if we solve it for music, then we can solve it for media, then we can solve it for news, then we can solve it for scientific citations, right? You need to take it all the way through to its logical conclusion. And at the moment, we're in a situation whereby I'm not worried, because I think that the ideas that I'm giving you now are going to be powerful enough to where people will run with them. And they're very hard to do wrong, right? Because they're pretty linear, when you think about it. It's like, and so what would be interesting would be to see what a company like Facebook would do with this. Facebook wants to have trusted sources and verification, or does it? But if you could have every article have a score, this article is 97 out of 100. It was corroborated by 27 university professors who backed their reputation at the university to say this research was correct. And this other article was backed by 14 people based out of a local college that wouldn't corroborate them. So one scores low, the other's higher. All you have to do is show those two things and let the human make the decision. Because my gut is this: once you've seen a truth score, an algorithmically generated, unhackable or supposed unhackable truth score, you can't unsee it. You can't go, no, I'd much rather trust Fox News to tell me the truth. I'd much rather trust this institution to tell me the truth. So am I worried? 50-50. But what I do know is this, that it's going to become unacceptable for us to just sit there and say, let's leave the norm as it is, right? Let's carry on spitting out WAV files and publishing blogs that can be altered. Like, I've altered my own blogs for typos and stuff. That should be seen, right? In the same way that Google versions every version of a Google Doc, shouldn't all media be that way? Not into a centralized authority, but into a decentralized repository in which you can share what is important, But if it came down to it, if you had to prove it and you had to expose a source, or you and the source agreed it's time to expose, you could do so together in a controlled manner, not to everybody. So transparency is a double-edged sword, right? Sometimes you don't, it's not expedient to know the truth.
So some people I speak to talk about transparency for businesses, privacy for individuals.
Yeah.
Does that sound like the right way, or is that not quite right?
Well, it's difficult because so if you're running a business that's having trouble, you don't necessarily want all your employees to know that, because you can turn a corner pretty fast if you make the right moves. So there's a great Ben Horowitz book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, where he describes, on the one hand, we're running out of money in a month, and if everyone knew that, they would all walk out the door. On the other hand, I can see a deal that I'm about to do. So does it serve the best good of the company to be transparent about that? Because remember that the economic value for those humans that you're creating by towing the line and making it work, right? Every company has a white knuckle thing, has a white knuckle event in their past that they have to kind of, say that it will get through or not, So I think that if it depends on what business the company's in. Like, you can't be competitive if you're totally open, because people will know your roadmap and what you're working on. So I think that there are degrees to it. But what I think is important is if you're saying stuff about other people, if you're manipulating other people's media for your own gain, I think that there should be an ability for the person who created it to query and understand what's going on with what they have created. And I think that as far as the news side goes, I think that every journalist and every piece of news ever created should basically have an identity and authority mechanism put over it, which would allow for people to prove, validate citations, and create strong corroboratable digital identities and authorities. So you literally have a digital library of Alexandria, not just of the media, but of how the media was created. It's a bit like, imagine this scenario, right? You and I decide, hey, we're going to publish a new version of the Bible, which is going to fix a few things. How many people would ever know? Like, think about it. If you published, and you suddenly put 1 million of these Bibles into hotel rooms all over the world, and it was just a slightly different interpretation. And let's say that you read the Bible when you were 20, and now you're 50, and you kind of like, I don't remember this bit about Mark, but it's in the Bible, right? Like, think about it. That trust that we have in the printed word is invalid. Because I can walk into Amazon, if they don't have the book I want, I can have them print it. What if it's an anti-Amazon book and they decide, you know what, let's just not print that one, or let's spice it up a little bit and change it? No one would ever know. Yeah. So as we go into this is why we have to be able to tell machines what to do. Otherwise, we will literally be fed what to do by machines. And if you want to talk about how you manufacture consent,
we also need to make sure the machines are coded right, that they aren't actually twisting the truth.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why I like a blockchain, is because a blockchain is basically stamping, this happened at this time of day, this happened at this time of day, on and on, in this immeasurable block. So once you get to block height, this, new block height, on and on. Once you start to build these blocks of information, to go in and overwhelm them would require hacking all of the participant nodes.
Okay. So as long as the software is open source and you know what it's doing, then we're fine.
Exactly, because effectively what would happen is, remember, if you create media today, any changes to that media are irrelevant because you would never know. There's no change log, no place you can go back to verify that isn't owned by somebody else. If the blockchain is the change log, then you would have to get everyone's acquiescence to alter anything that went below it. You can amend it forward, but you can never delete the past. So what happens is if you start to go back and say, well, hang on a minute, this new truth, I ran a machine algorithm on that printing of the Bible. There's 27 discrepancies. That's odd, because this version, and it was altered by this person at this time. You can always go back and find it. There's an amazing book called The Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy, right? I read it when I was younger. And they found that the Torah, the original version of the Bible, or the Jewish version of the Bible, it doesn't make sense. The Torah, effectively, is the most accurate because it basically has around 27 differences from the quote-unquote original. The reason is that if you made a mistake, you had to throw it away and start again. So they really made sure to copyright. Whereas New Testament, who knows? Think of that today, where you could literally write into the blockchain an agreement that this is this version of it. So any alteration is an amendment to that version. Amendment. So you will always know, hey, it was amended at this point. So that would be equivalent of a software fork, right? Where you go, now this version versus this version. So you can have that, that's fine. This is the original Bible, this is the King James, this is the, you know, whatever you want to call it. I don't know why we're so biblical today, because it's apocalyptic. But the way to view it is this: if you look at all the scholarly work that is done on, let's say, getting the, you know, my favorite William Blake, you know, all of his works done in this beautiful way, it would be amazing to say, right, all scholars agree that this is the official version. So therefore, if I propose an amendment or change to the digital version of that, that would then create the analog versions of it, you would see it. It's not unhackable, but it's really hard to hack, because as long as you know where it came from, you can kind of project where it's going. And what I think is fascinating is that, like, you know, propaganda is easy if you can just manufacture it all day long. But if it's really hard to get people to stand behind a falsehood, because inherently I believe that humans don't want to do that. I think inherently they want what's good. They want to go towards a more positive, you know, outcome for the larger bulk of humanity. But what's amazing is a system of intelligence is only as smart as what made it. And if we don't know what made it, how do we ever control it? And I think that what's fascinating is that when you look at the ability of AI to you know, solve, you know, we use it in music metadata. We know who the artist is. We can find who the songwriters and who all the positions are because we can do that. Well, the news could be the same. Bulk corroboration of identity and authority and assets is the future. And so otherwise we would be controlled by it. And I would much rather have a blockchain-backed system tracking all the changes to a story I'm telling you than I would Medium or Google Docs, who are subject only to their own mandates. There's nothing about them that means that they have to be kind, that they have to care.
I didn't tell you something, Benji. My bad. I just got given a couple of billion by my mate Bill. Nice VC. Said invest in whatever you want. Doesn't need to meet profit necessarily. It's about social good, or maybe make some money, but, you know, want to be a nice public benefit kind of company, the way of the future, rather than just making money for someone else. What should we invest in? What are the other areas that we should be putting money in this new future to make the world better?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's going to be the future of work. With so many humans being put out of work from, you know, the kind of ongoing fourth industrial revolution that we're experiencing, I think that we're going to see a huge amount of people going into the caring for other human services, which is great. But effectively, I would be looking at, I mean, I would be having task forces at every news organization saying, listen, how can we help journalists corroborate and enshrine their sources in a place that cannot be overwhelmed? So I think that we're going to look at it in a few ways. We need to allow those that create the tools and interfaces in which to be able to make themselves a living and exist. There'll be a lot more time to consume media. Let's make sure that it's wholesome and nourishing. We need to look at how addictive the devices and interfaces that we're creating are at this point. That's going to be a big one. You think getting someone off, you know, drugs is hard. You know, getting someone off cell phones is arguably as hard, right? Because it's that same dopamine reaction. And I think that what we're going to go to is a time where, if we get it right, there will be a lot more time to enjoy our lives. You know, I would love for my daughter not to have to go work a crappy job just to earn a living. Not because I don't think that the work ethic is wrong, but because what's the point? Imagine if we could unlock her brain power to make the world better. You know, Warren Buffett said something amazing when he talked about, you know, he said, think of the wealth and what we've been able to create as a society with 50% of the world's brain power activated. Now, as more women are coming into the workplace, we're going to see we could potentially double that capacity, which means that we may have the chance to get it right. Maybe a maternal instinct is what has been required over this kind of, the madness of men. But what I think is fascinating is that my daughter is going to go into a place where she will like, why would I go backwards and, you know, write in pencil to vote? Seems very strange when I can tell a machine what to play. Why do I go back in time to do something that, here? And so I think that if I were the recipient of the billions of dollars, I would be looking to solve scientific citations, news citations. I would build applications that would allow for the decentralization of as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. I would allow for provenance tracking of media. I would allow for anyone that creates to have an interface that can commit commerce at the speed of digital, not slowed down by, oh, let's make a deal about paper. All that has to go. I look to modernize the way in which voting occurs so that it can be unimpeachable and corroboratable via a public system, not a private one. All of these things are doable. And the thing about blockchains is that they've been hard to deploy and scale. They're, the fastest one, Ethereum, fastest scaled one is Ethereum, between 7 and 20 transactions per second.
And it uses a lot of energy.
Yeah, and ultimately, but again, that's just we're in this kind of introduction or inception phase. As we deploy this technology at size and speed and scale, we're going to see immense efficiencies in mining capability, improving of each other. It's not going to require the level of electrical output it does today. Because look, when internet first came out, you looked at Netscape and you're like, oh my God, this is pretty horrible. And yet you'd wait for porn to load really slowly. Oh my goodness, we're at that point on blockchain. Let's imagine its deployment. Carlota Perez really is the kind of, gets it right on this, where she talks about the way that technology introduced and then deployed. I think we're seeing the kind of building out of this arc of creative output. And it's going to be amazing. It won't look like what we knew it as us old men, Vlad, as the 100-year-olds in the room. Just because he's got a beard, we're probably the same age. But but it's one of these things whereby it's going to be a young girl, a young boy, somewhere we've never heard of, will have the ability to create and not just revenue, but also create scalable products at speed, irrelevant of how much money they can earn from it, irrelevant of the existing incumbent rights miseries that occur when you're trying to get things out there, because this girl or boy is going to have something to say that will resonate with millions of humans. And today the technology is designed to slow that down or to fence it off into a social network privately owned. Tomorrow, as we decentralize these things, you won't have to polish a turd, right? Which is currently like, this media is great, let's polish it and get it out there. It'll literally be, what you create is brilliant, it will be shared, monetizable, and you'll be able to build on top of it. Whereas today, everything is kind of like in these very slow increments of change. And I think that Spotify and Google need 1,000 competitors. Okay. And the second that happens, it gets really fun.
So look, Benji, before we sign off on the formal interviewing stuff, I don't always necessarily ask the right questions. What else, anything else I should know or be aware of or be thinking about?
I think you asked it great. I think, what we have to do is, today, it requires a huge amount of energy and power to unlock the potential of the individual. It requires fundraising. It requires the burning of resources and expending of energy. That may not be relevant soon. So what we have to do is build for the rule set that's coming, right? You're seeing this in autonomous vehicles. Who's going to write the code that says, kill 2 people instead of 5? Kill the older person instead of the younger? Hard things to do for a human, but we're going there. So let's allow it to happen and make it something that the expressions of it are tracked. Because one would think that we can enshrine digital rights in such a way. I guess what I'm saying is this: digital rights expression is going to be the way in which machines and humans interact. And so we need to be able to have a kind of an anchor that says this is the moment in time at which it occurred. And we have to sit there and say, I call bullshit on that. Why? Because you weren't able to get the citations, because I can see 7 points it was altered. This is wrong. And we as humans instinctively know when something's wrong. Clout was an early example of this, K-L-O-U-T. Something about it was like, why is it 70 and this one 20? What is that? No,
Clout wasn't about a real score. It's about how well you gamed the system, it seemed to me.
True. It's true, but imagine if it was not gameable.
So look, this is a question I wasn't going to ask you, so I didn't think Chinese
Yes.
politics were your thing.
Yeah.
But have you heard about, I think China is calling it the social credit system. Have you heard about this or have any thoughts about it?
I've heard a little about it. And again, I think that because the technology today is controllable, these types of things are inevitable in a more authoritarian regime. The interesting thing about China...
For anyone who doesn't follow up, it's basically like right now, maybe you give your Uber driver points, your Uber driver gives you points. This is ones that everyone in society gives you, and these points are all the trials they're doing right now in China. They may affect if you can get credit, if you can rent an apartment, if you can get a job. So for anyone who's seen it, it's like that Netflix Black Mirror episode Nosedive. Anyway.
And the reason this is so interesting is this. The one thing that China's focused on, which actually arguably America is not, or UK is not, is China is focused on making wealthy the most number of humans possible in its society. And it's going to try and do what it requires to do that. In this country and in America and in England, that's not the focus. The focus is on enriching the 1%. Whether they say it or not, that's just how that is, right? Otherwise, you would find a way to get healthcare to more people cheaper. Otherwise, you would, so it's designed literally, in a vacuum.
So you're not. So let me understand. You're not hating it.
No. What I'm saying is that I think that it's the interim measure that they're going to try and take, but it will be completely overwhelmed by decentralized autonomous organizations. Okay. So effectively what will happen is, how do you shut an internet down, right? Without like literally pulling the plug on all the power. But I can put up a solar charger for my phone. I have one in the other room, right? So I think that what happens is authoritarian regimes will always try and hold on to the maximum that they can, but it's a dying thing. VPNs, their job is to try and beat the technology, but eventually technology wins because it's cycled just much faster. China, I think, has a better chance at doing something like this. I don't agree with that. I don't think it should be there. I don't think it's the correct method. But I think that what we're going to look at as we go into the future is that a blockchain is going to be very hard for even a state actor like that to overwhelm. Okay. It's interesting that they didn't shut down mining of Bitcoins. They shut down the exchanges. Why? Awesome. Potentially to keep a whole bunch of the current currency in the country. Because remember, they want to enrich the most amount of humans in China. So there are very, very poor parts and very, very wealthy parts. But at the same time, the goal of the party, the goal of that state, is to enrich itself and all of the participants to it. Because there are a lot of people there, right? So you remember, they're also looking 5 years ahead. America and in Europe, or certain parts of Europe, don't look 5 years ahead. They look for the next 2 years of election cycles only, which means that you have a very myopic view of the world. So I think that, again, we've not seen a blockchain deployed at scale. We've never seen it before. Bitcoin is the biggest manifestation of it, Ethereum second, and others on top of that, but we haven't seen one of these things become bulletproof. So, and this is the analogy. If you look at it this way, in the internet bubble and burst, there was thousands of bullshit companies, right? Thousands of, the pets.com is the example you always get, thousands of them, feathers.com or pigeon.com, whatever the hell it was. And you could get funding for it. In the same way ICOs are happening in this marketplace. But out of that bubble, of those 10,000 companies, let's call it, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, Uber, YouTube, boom, you name them. There were 30, 40 massive companies that are now trillions of dollars. If the same thing happens in the ICO market, right? Imagine the size and scale of the 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 companies that come out of that, building on top of Amazon, Google, etc. That's what we may see. So there may be so much wealth in the world that you could do UBI across it. It's not inconceivable. What we have to do is you have to build a framework for how the economic system will work. And I think that today there's enough really smart people focusing on this problem to where it's getting the more attention than it's ever had. So Benji, what could go wrong? Everything. right? What could go wrong is everything, but what could go right is everything too. And so I believe that enough people will harness this technology for good. That will mean that to attack it is going to be really, really fucking difficult. And I can envisage a place where there is a credits and point system in a bunch of more authoritarian countries that is suddenly made obsolete overnight by a larger one that is uncontrollable.
So Benji, do you know what? Coming up in the next few weeks, I'm going to be chatting to some people who work with NATO Cyber Command, some senior European politicians that are involved in the UBI. I get a feeling we might have to come back to this, maybe do like a Facebook live chat or whatever else we can.
Yeah.